Basic Brewing Radio is brought to you by the American Homebrewers Association, who invite you to celebrate Mead Month this August. For a limited time, the American Homebrewers Association is offering a free copy of Ken Schramm's book, The Complete Mead Maker, to joining and renewing members. Visit homebrewersassociation.org/mead for details. That's homebrewersassociation.org/mead. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, August 5th, 2021. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Steve Wilkes and I celebrate Mead Month by sampling 3 delicious meads from his collection. All 3 were made by Steve with beer yeasts. Will the beer yeast be able to multitask? Stay tuned. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. If you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our brewers' logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And many thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter, including Financial Supporters Friday. We'll see an early release of the next video episode featuring my Hot Porch NEPA brewed with Kveik. It's based on Matt Giovanisi's quote-unquote perfect New England IPA that he talked about on this show, along with fermenting the beer on my summertime temperature porch with Imperial's A46 Bartleby. I decided to forego the dry hopping. And the reason was that I didn't want to risk oxidizing the beer. I don't have a fancy system like Matt where he can eliminate oxygen when he dry hops. And my fear of oxidation in this recipe came from an email from Dave in Germany who wrote, "I was very surprised Matt uses 30% of flaked adjuncts because unmalted grains contain a significant higher amount of manganese, as Scott Janisch stated in his book. This might increase the potential for oxidation a lot, as manganese is one of the few metals that aren't stripped out during fermentation by the yeast. I also read about the haze that is produced by flaked adjuncts and that it isn't as permanent as with malted grains because the proteins in flaked grains are supposedly larger and thus drop out faster." Well, I know a solution for that. Drink your beer more quickly, Dave. I shared Dave's note with Matt, and he replied, "Yeah, I read this part too, and it was a concern. I can tell you that if I pour a beer and let it sit out overnight, it turns purple, then brown. But because drink the beer fat, drink the beer." But Matt says, "But because I take great consideration in reducing oxygen throughout the entire fermentation and packing process, I never had a New England IPA or NEPA go dark on me. That said, I'm going to have to try using malted grains instead of flaked ones. I've toyed with this idea before, but haven't pulled the trigger." Well, I appreciate both Matt and Dave. I can say that I haven't had any oxidation issues with my beer, at least not yet. This despite my low-tech method of simply purging my keg with CO2 and racking from a plastic bucket. But again, I think that if I were to dry hop in the bucket, that would give much more ample opportunity for oxygen exposure to the beer. Let's talk about our friends and sponsors, Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. Along with being pioneers in the world of electric brewing, you can find a wide variety of delicious beer kits at highdravitybrew.com, like Stumbling Dragonfly IPA, described as a thirst-quenching Midwest-style IPA that comes in at a hefty 9.2% ABV with lots of Citra, Mosaic, and Simcoe. Or a kit called This Aggression Will Not Stand, Man. It's a perfect combination of cold brew coffee from Double Shot Coffee Company, milk sugar, and vanilla extract. Careful, man, there's a beverage here. And of course, you know highdravitybrew.com is the home for Warthog electric brewery controllers and systems, and if you use the code EBC75BB, you can take the Pionetta propane with your own Warthog system for $75 off. That's EBC75BB. From 5 gallons to 2 barrels, HighGravityBrew.com has your electric brewing needs covered. EBC 75BB to save money, $75 on your own Warthog controller and or system. At family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. Okay, I've been wanting to sample these meads for a long time. They've been in a cabinet, in the dark, in the cool, just waiting for the opportunity. So I was really happy to talk to Steve about how these three came together. Steve Wilkes, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, James.
You're there in the studios at stevesbrewshop.com.
Yep. Here I am on a Tuesday afternoon. It's a beautiful day in Fayetteville.
And we're celebrating National Mead Month.
I know.
I don't know.
Great.
I don't know who determines these things, but, you got to go with the flow.
That's right. Especially
when the flow is out of these beautiful bottles of mead I have in front of me. We were talking the other day. I have these 3 bottles of mead in the cabinet, and you gave them to me a long time ago, thinking that we were going to do a video episode with it. And I thought, let's just get those out and do an audio show. And, that way we can talk about it into more detail and kind of, because in the video show we're always in kind of a hurry. In the audio show we can kind of take our time more and get more into the details. And, people don't have to watch us roll our eyes when we say how good the meat is. So,
right. Exactly.
But these things have problems. You had some ill health this past year, and thank goodness you're better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm taking it that these 3 meads are kind of aged. They've been in the bottle a while.
They have. Let's see. They were all made at about the same week, I think. Yeah. So they were all made about Valentine's Day of 2020. They were laid down. So, for instance, the first one that we'll sample, which is just an Ozark wildflower mead, that was put in the fermenter on February the 15th of 2020, and it was bottled on October the 18th of 2020. And here we are drinking it today. Now I've had a few bottles of this along the way, but today we're having our bottles respectively in our homes, or I'm in my shop, but
right.
At any rate.
And these 3 have in common that they were all brewed with beer yeast.
Yeah, they were. So the wildflower mead was brewed with imperial. They're all brewed with imperial liquid or slurried yeast. So this is brewed with imperial pub. The second mead that we'll sample was brewed with imperial house, which is an English strain. And the third mead that we'll sample was brewed with a combination of imperial workhorse and with Lalvin 71B wine yeast.
Oh, interesting.
So that'll be fun to try.
You brewed these with slurried yeast, and we may have some slurried words here in a few minutes, but
it's very possible.
So why beer yeast and not the traditional, standbys of the mead world, the wine yeasts?
Well, I was just wanting to. Well, one, I was just wanting to play with the different beer yeasts and see what happened. I've always had pretty good luck with beer yeast. I like to use beer yeast to make mead with. I like that, for instance, on this first one, I think that might be a good place to start. The first mead that we'll sample is a 4-gallon batch. It yielded actually 19 bottles, 750 milliliter bottles. It started life as 9.5 pounds of local raw honey from right in our neck of the woods. And I live in Fayetteville. You live in Prairie Grove. The honey came from Farmington, which is a little town between the two of us, and it's a 9% mead. The uh, yeast that I chose has about a 10% alcohol tolerance.
Hmm.
So I knew that the yeast would give out at about the amount of potential alcohol that the mead had, or that the solution had, and it sure enough did. So I didn't back sweeten the mead at all.
Hmm.
It's as sweet as it was naturally. So and that was, by design. And also, pub is very popular among cider makers. I've got a number of customers who use it to make cider with, and I thought, well, I bet you that'd make a really nice mead. And sure enough, I think it did. So we could give that a taste and see what we think.
Yeah, I'm smelling it right now, and the nose on it is wonderful. It's just nothing but honey. Just very sweet smelling. I haven't tasted it yet, but in that same thing, we had the tastings with Tim Lieber.
Right.
It was the wildflower honey that I really, or was it clover?
Clover.
It was the one that was just like, oh man, that's honey.
Right.
That just smells like honey ought to smell, and this is what that smells like.
Yeah, this just retained. Yeah, this is just like summer in a bottle to me. It just has all that rich honey nose. Exactly. It's light. At 9%, it's not going to just knock you over, but it's very satisfying, I think. It made a very pretty mead. It's visible. It's visually very pretty, nice golden color, and I say wildflower. I don't really know what the flower mixture was. I just kind of assume it's a wildflower honey. A fellow that teaches at the university, his wife and my wife are friends, and lo and behold, he keeps bees, I found out, and he gave me basically a 10-gallon bucket of honey, and who's going to turn that down? So,
wow.
I mean, not 10-gallon. I mean 10 pound. Excuse me. That would have been really great, really good friend.
Friends for life.
I misspoke. Yeah.
Wow, with the flavor, it doesn't disappoint. And it's sweet, but without being overly sweet. It's not cloying. It's not like sticky. And there is a bit of acidity in there to balance it out. Did you add like an acid blend to help out the balance?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
The only thing that I did to it was a little bit of yeast nutrient, actually Fermade O, I believe. At the very beginning, about 2 days in, I added some yeast, nutrient packet, and that's it. That's all I did. And it, as I recall, the fermentation went pretty quickly. I let it clear out. I, let nature do its course. I didn't even degas it. I didn't go through a degassing regimen of any kind with it. I just let it naturally degas, and it stayed in there from February until I know I did rack it into a secondary. Now I did do that with all of these. They did go from a primary into a secondary. So I suppose one could argue that there was a degassing when you move it from one to the other. There is a degassing that happens at that moment.
Right.
But other than that, that was it. And then I let it just bulk age for quite some time until I bottled it on the 18th of October. And that's it.
Well, you took good care of it because it's not oxidized at all. It's nice and bright and sweet and flavorful, and the honey character is really right up front. Luckily, I've got one of those little devices that you sell that you can put the little rubber stopper in there and suck out the air so that it won't. Hopefully, I can keep it fresh.
Yeah, I love those things.
Because I'm not going to drink all three of these bottles here today, this afternoon.
Right.
I got a show to produce tomorrow.
Yeah, I have to drive home.
Luckily, my commute is less, but still, you gotta take care of yourself. So with these beer yeasts, do you have to treat them any differently from the traditional the wine yeasts?
I don't. If you do, no one's told me about it. I I treat them exactly the same. I have found that they work very well. I get good, strong fermentations with them. They aren't going to produce a highly, they're not going to produce a big alcoholic mead because they just don't have that much fermentation power, you might say. But if you're looking for a 9 or a 10% mead, somewhere in that range, then they work beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to get up into 14, 15%, then you have to use a wine yeast. Mm-hmm. Or, as I did in the cherry mead, you can use a combination, and we can talk about that in a little bit.
So what are the stats on this? What was the starting gravity and the finishing gravity?
Okay, the starting gravity on this mead was 1074, and the final gravity was 1.004.
Huh. Interesting.
So, yeah. And like I say, the yield was 19 bottles. And that's what my notes have anyway, from a year ago. And 9.5 pounds of honey. And that's about all I wrote down. I didn't write a whole lot down.
Did you use any kind of stabilizer or clarifier?
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, sure. Sorry. I always do that. I guess that almost seems like a without saying. So I didn't use a clarifier I on this one, I know. But I did use, I always shelf stabilize these. I always use a portion of potassium metabisulfite and a portion of potassium sorbate to stabilize the mead or the wine so that it can't ferment in the bottle, and sort of stop any fermentation that could reoccur in the bottle. And I think it helps with the shelf stable, to make the mead more shelf stable. And I do that with all of mine now. A lot of guys don't do that. Some people will only use sorbate, but I like to use both products. And you don't use you use it according to directions. So I'm not even going to go into the amounts, but use them according to the volume that you're packaging, and I think that it really helps the product a lot. So that's what I do, and that'll ensure that you don't end up with spritzy, semi-carbonated mead down the road.
Right. Now, it may be a function of the long time in the secondary, but it's super clear.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tiny bit of sediment in the bottom, but not much.
Right. Yeah, and I don't filter. I mean, I don't mechanically filter my meads, and when I rack them over, I'm sure that I pick up just a bit of lees that's probably not floating around. In other words, when I rack them over for packaging, they're probably about as clear as they're going to get. But I bet you that I get a little bit greedy and pull up a little bit, and so that's what's down there. But that's a small price to pay. Now, if I were doing it commercially, or perhaps competitively, I might be more careful about that. But for that little 16th or 32nd of an ounce of lees on the bottom of that, I think it's okay.
Yeah, and I doubt that anybody would notice until they got down to the last pour of the bottle. There's so little, but
yeah.
And we never talk about water chemistry when we are talking about meads, but do you do any kind of water chemistry adjustment?
Nope, I didn't. And I know on these that I just went to the store and just bought just plain old commercial drinking water. No,
Okay.
I didn't do anything fancy. Um, yeah, so that's it. I didn't do a thing to them.
So there's probably some minerals added for flavor, in unless it's a reverse osmosis water.
Well, yeah, and if it's RO water, if you have RO water, you would want to add some minerals back in. But I'll be honest, I don't know. If you're adding minerals back in for beer, then you're doing that in some ways. You're doing that for the hops. So there's no hops here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what you do. I wouldn't want to say, well, you want to add, gypsum, or you want to add Burton water salts. I really don't know what you would add. That's a little bit above my pay grade to talk extemporaneously about. I'd want to do a little bit of research. I think probably Ken Schramm's book, The Complete Mead Maker, which I understand you can get a copy of this month.
It's an embedded plug.
That's right. Well, I'm good at this sort of thing.
Refer to the start of the show.
Well, but actually, that's probably where I would go look. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where I personally would look to see if Ken makes any recommendations. And if he didn't, then I don't know. I'd just go on the internet and kind of hunt around. But if anybody's going to tell you what to do, it's going to be Ken.
Yeah.
And if there's anybody's advice I would take, it's going to be his. But I know on all three of these meads, I know that I didn't do anything other than buy probably that Ozarka brand. That's usually what I buy, and it's a good artesian well, drinking water.
Oh, okay.
And I like how it tastes just as a drinking water, and I brew with it, pretty frequently. So I know that's what I use.
So it is actually spring water and not like always save drinking water.
Oh, right. Yes, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't like an RO water that then somebody else did something to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Well, it's delicious. I'm going to have another sample of that after we're done. But whatever you did, it was good because it's super tasty. It's sweet. Like I said, sweet without being overly sweet.
It's not cloying.
No, not at all. I mean, there's no, no stickiness, left on the tongue, and you don't feel like you need some carbonation, in there to kind of scrub that off. It's not a dessert mead, I wouldn't think.
We drink this mead just like we would any light white wine.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of fills the niche of a Riesling or a Moscato, in terms of how you drink it at home. It's really good. I like it quite a lot.
Let's take a quick break to talk about delicious summer tartness coming from our friends and sponsors Ricky and Kelly from Groenfell and Havoc Meaderies. Rumble, the first sour in the Sour Mead series, was first released a year ago, and to celebrate, they're doing a limited re-release. If you go to Groenfell.com right now, you can find that Rumble is shipping, even as we speak. Rumble is brewed with honey from Champlain Valley apiaries in Vermont, along with pure blueberry and blackberry juice, and there's a blend of sour yeast strains. And that's not all for sour mead fans. There's a sour mead case, which includes 8 cans of Meaderitaville, which is a pineapple, orange, and lime mead, Sour Mead Maker, a raspberry lime Ricky mead, and Psychopump, a cherry mead. Well, that just sounds like a lot of summer deliciousness. Check them all out at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's GROENNFELL. Let's move on to mead number 2.
Mead number 2.
This is slightly darker in color than mead number 1.
A little richer in color.
Yeah.
And this is a strawberry apricot mead. And this was a 3-gallon batch. The ingredients are 10 pounds of honey. And this wasn't a local honey. This was just a commercial honey, but a raw honey, a raw unfiltered honey. 3 pounds of apricot puree from well, it used to be called Vintner's Harvest, and now it's what, Oregon? I think they've changed their name.
Right, right.
So the 3 pounds of the apricot puree and 3 pounds of strawberry puree, and I fermented all of those together. And I started this mead on February the 14th of 2020. And I used now this has fruit in it. So I started it with a teaspoon of pectic enzyme and I've written down a tablespoon of Fermax, which is BSG's house brand of nutrient. So I know it has some DAP in it, and it's probably got magnesium sulfate and a couple of other things, but that's BSG's house brand, Fermax, and it works really well. And I used Imperial House to ferment this, and I think on the bottle, I think I wrote down 11%.
Right.
But that's not correct. It's actually 14%.
Oh my goodness.
So, so it's quite a bit stronger than than that label. But oh, and the other thing I did with this one too is at packaging, I added a very small amount of wine glycerin. And glycerin will, you don't want to overdo it, but glycerin will add a little bit of mouthfeel, a little bit like dextrin or maltodextrin in beer. It just kind of contributes a little bit of extra mouthfeel, and I kind of wanted that fuller. Don't want to say dessert, but just a little bit more mouthfeel in the mead, and so I added a couple of ounces of that into it as well.
And I think that might also have the perception of kind of lessening the effect of all that alcohol, maybe.
Yeah,
it might lessen the punch.
Yeah,
it's delicious. It's as you could predict, I was going to say, but the honey flavor, the honey character is muted by the fruit character.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that if you didn't tell me and you blindfolded me, whether I could pick out strawberry and or apricot or apricot. But there is a very prominent fruit character that's really nice. That is kind of, you can tell it's kind of a blend because or at least, I would think that you could tell it's a blend because it's not like, oh, strawberry or, ooh, apricot. But they're complementary because they blend together very well. Since these were purees, did you have to do anything? What was your process in combining the honey with the fruit, the purees?
I dumped them all together.
Did you heat it up any?
No, I didn't.
Wow.
I just the water. I heated the water a little bit, just enough to get the honey into suspension, and then the way I do it. So I fermented it in a 5-gallon carboy, with the idea that it was going to be a 3-gallon batch. So, and the way I did it this time, I actually used 3 gallons of water, as I recall. And so what I did is I took a gallon of water and I dissolved all the honey in that gallon of water. And then I pre-poured in the apricot puree and the strawberry puree into the carboy because it really is puree. It's not chunked at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I poured it through with using a funnel. And then I poured through the must that was dissolved into a gallon of water, or maybe 2 gallons. I can't remember exactly, but I poured through all the must. And then I added the other 2 gallons of water. So I had more than 3 gallons of volume because the displacement of the honey and the purees.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I had all that in and had it all stirred up well, then I then pitched the yeast and capped it off. So I had more than 3 gallons. Now, when I went to rack it off into the secondary, I had so much, with 6 pounds of puree in there,
Mm-hmm.
that puree doesn't go away, and you really you can't, you lose quite a lot of mead, or of liquid, I should say, with that kind of puree. That's one of the only drawbacks I have to that kind of product, or having the fruit in that state, because you do lose a fair amount of it, without, if you're going to leave behind, if you're going to pull a clean secondary, I guess I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I pulled it off to get my 3 gallons into the secondary, that's about what I ended up with out of all that, and it worked fine. So yeah, so that's what I got. So I pulled it to where it filled 3 gallons, and I still had quite a bit of puree in my 3 gallons. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm being real articulate, but and then that continued to work for a while.
And then you made freezy pops out of that.
That's right. Yeah.
I doubt it would freeze, but you could make some slushy, margarita type things.
Yeah. And again, I added the Fermax, after it had been fermenting for a few days. I didn't mark it exactly. They say it's like after a third of the sugar breaks and all that, but I just let it go for, I don't remember, maybe about 3 days, and then I hit it with some nutrient. But the Imperial House just chewed right through it. I mean, it's just it's not a house, it's a house wrecker. I mean, it did a great job.
Yeah, did it go above its listed alcohol tolerance?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't really. I'm sure it's not. I doubt it's rated to 14, but that's where it took it. It started at 1.114, and it cleared out at 1.004, and that's 14% if my math is right.
Wow.
And it definitely drinks like it. I mean, there's a bunch of alcohol in there, and
but at the same time, it's not rocket fuel.
No, it's not hot. It's not hot at all, and this one will really sneak up on you a bunch.
I poured a small sample. I want to be able to continue talking throughout the rest of the show.
I like this one because I like the fruit. It's very subdued. I do actually. For me, the apricot comes through fairly strong. The strawberry, I think, is a little bit lost.
Mm-hmm.
But strawberry apricot's a real common combination. You hear about strawberry apricot pie and things like that, which was the inspiration for it. I still get quite a bit of apricot, and I get a lot of honey. I get the honey notes are still really prevalent for me as well. So I'm really happy with this mead as well. I think it came out just beautifully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's delicious. I can't fault it for anything, other than it's just it's big as far as powerful. But again, it's not hot, so it's and it's not sticky again.
Nope.
So it's not like a big gloppy dessert mead.
Yep. And again, I didn't back sweeten. None of these have been back sweetened. They're all just how they fermented.
Now, if you were to back sweeten, would you just add more honey? Would you just use honey? Because you wouldn't want to put more puree into.
No, I'd either use honey, but actually, honey would be great. But what I like to use is a product called wine conditioner, which is basically an inverted simple syrup, and it does have some sorbate in it. It's a product that I sell. I don't know who makes it, but I like it because it doesn't change the flavor of the wine or the mead at all. It doesn't affect it. So it does just sweeten it. I think it does have a little bit of glycerin in it, and it has some sorbate. So it does have a preservative quality. It does have a little bit of viscosity, and then it sweetens the product. And I've found that I really like the results I've had with it when I've used it. The other thing that would be just as effective and perfectly reasonable to use would be to make your own simple syrup. Just to boil a little table sugar, um, yourself. The only reason that I wouldn't necessarily use honey is because if you've done all the work to make this nice, pretty, clear mead, that's golden and beautiful and doesn't have any haze of any kind in it, and then you add honey to it, it's probably going to have a haze then.
Hmm.
It's gonna take on a kind of a hazy quality. Now, if that doesn't bother you, don't worry about it. Go ahead and use the honey. That's just fine. It certainly will taste beautiful, but I do like that using a simple syrup in that it doesn't change the color, it doesn't change the quality of the product, other than to add sweetness. I don't recommend just pouring sugar, granulated sugar or powdered sugar or any kind of a solid sugar into it and stirring it up. I've had folks do that, and it doesn't necessarily dissolve and all the way, and that could be problematic. So you do want to add a liquid sweetener of some kind, but and then also you want to make sure that you've stabilized it. Now I do that again. You do want to be sure that you've used some sorbate and some Camden tablet or potassium metabisulfite and stabilize that so that it can't ferment. Or when you add that sugar to back sweeten it, you're not going to back sweeten it, you're going to carbonate it.
Back in the day, our first meads were carbonated.
Yes.
If you remember, if I'm remembering correctly. And our first meads were done with kits from from Andy's old store, the home brewery. And they were simple to do. And I remember those meads as being really good. And
they were terrific.
And I remember after the first couple of batches, I was like, maybe I should just make mead because this is really good. It's a lot easier.
Yeah,
you don't have to boil all this stuff for a long period of time. And at that point we were extract brewers, and it was just kind of tempting to. I remember sitting, at a party on the patio, celebrating some friend's wedding, that we had made meads for, sparkling meads, and just looking at these champagne-like bubbles coming up in champagne flutes, and just thinking, wow, this maybe this. But honey's expensive, and that probably is what what turned me away from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, have you made a sparkling mead lately?
Not lately. I haven't. No. I tend to make still meads, but those are great, and they're easy to do, and they're delicious. They're absolutely delicious. I think that the one we're drinking right now would have been a little bit too big to do that with, but the first one, the 9% mead, would have been a lovely sparkling mead.
Oh yeah.
I just didn't do it that way, but boy, are those good. And if you want to do that, you just want to treat it in a way a little bit like you do a beer. You want to carbonate it using a little bit of pasteurized syrup that you've made yourself, either with table sugar or corn sugar or honey. Any one of those three will work. Into a 5-gallon batch, you'd use about 3/4 of a cup of corn syrup or about a half a cup of honey, and you'd add that to your 5-gallon batch of mead. So you do want to make sure you have the right proportion, and then you'll want to bottle that, and you'll either want to bottle that in beer bottles are the easiest because you can cap those. You can't put them in wine bottles and cork them. You'd have to put them in a true champagne bottle with a true champagne cork and a cage, and that's a little harder to do for most folks. They're not going to have that ability. But if you bottle beer at all, you can sure put it in beer bottles, and it works just fine.
And if you buy cheap champagne, you can usually put a crown cap on that.
That's true, yeah.
I remember at that same wedding diving into the not saying that they had the cheapest of champagnes, but they had champagne that I could cap, and so I remember making Susan proud, as there I was in my suit and tie diving into the garbage,
dumpster diving for bottles
at the wedding reception.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Well, you're hearing about how these beer yeasts from Imperial Organic Yeast did in these delicious meads. If you've used Imperial Organic Yeast, you know that's not a surprise. With an industry-leading pitch rate of 200 billion cells and top-notch technical support and customer service, Imperial is my go-to yeast, and they should be yours too. This summer's seasonal yeast is Imperial A46 Bartleby, which I mentioned at the top of the show. It's a Norwegian Hornindal strain, and you'll see in the upcoming Basic Brewing video episode how Bartleby just ate up the wort of my Hot Porch New England IPA. At around human body temperature, Bartleby got going within a couple hours. I mean, literally, the airlock was bubbling within just a couple hours and was pumping like a steam train before I went to bed. Check out my Instagram feed for video of all that action, that airlock action. And the best part is that the beer is really delicious. It's so good. It's super fruity, clean as whistle, 7.9% ABV. Thank goodness it's not 9.7. It's 7.9% ABV, but you'd never know it until the next morning, of course, if you're not careful. Take advantage of the summer heat and ask your local homebrew store for A46 Bartleby from Imperial Organic Yeast. And check them out at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. Okay, mead number 3.
Mead number 3.
Just imagine the stories I'm going to be telling here in just a few minutes.
Well, yeah, you will after this one. So mead number 3 is actually what I call cherry mead number 5. So this must be my fifth cherry mead in a row. You know, the fifth one that I've done, fifth cherry melomel. I love saying melomel. It just sounds so erudite.
You need to make one and call it melomel tourmay.
That's right.
The velvet fog.
The velvet fog. So
well, cheers.
So this one, yeah, cheers.
It has a reddish hue.
It does indeed. That's cherries.
Oh my. Oh. Ooh. It doesn't have much of a nose, or at least on my nose may be deadened by now. But man, the flavor. It in a good way, and don't take offense at this. Let me take another sip. Remember when you were a kid, the only candy that you could bring to school were those little Luden's cough drops.
Yep.
In the little white rectangular box, and they were little, pill-shaped or, ovoid shaped red cherry candies.
Yep.
I used to love those so much. The only benefit of going to school sick was, you legitimately could eat cough drops in the school. But this reminds me of that. The cherry is not in an artificial way, but in a it's in your face. It's fresh and bright and fruity and wow. Again, it's a well-made mead in that it's not like rocket fuel. It's big. Yeah. It's not small. No. 18%. It is big, but it doesn't taste big. Man. So talk about this one while I drink more.
Well, I've had a few sips and I am warm all of a sudden. I'm heating up. This is so I made this on February the 10th, 2020, and I don't have a bottling day on it, but I bet you I bottled it at the same time I bottled the others. So in late October, I'm sure I bottled them all about the same time. The recipe is a 5-gallon batch. It has 224 ounces of tart cherry juice, and I used Knudsen's tart cherry juice. There's no water. It's just the cherry juice. I take that back. There's probably a little bit. So 7 quarts of – I take that back. There's 7 quarts of cherry juice and 15 pounds of honey. And then whatever water would be necessary to bring it to a 5-gallon fermentate, 5-gallon batch. And then, oh gosh, I'm already, my head is spinning. Not used to this.
Luckily, it's early in the afternoon. You can take a break.
That's right. The I've got in my notes here, the original Brix was 29.5. So it was a 1.134 original gravity. And the final gravity was 0.998.
Really?
Yeah. And so that actually works out on paper to be 17.8 alcohol.
Wow.
But here's what I did. So I put this all together, and so it's just the cherry juice and the honey and the water. I would have used some yeast nutrient at the beginning. I probably used, I don't have it written down. Let me make sure. I'm looking at my notes. I probably even would have put some pectic enzyme in there as well, in that I'm not sure if I would have needed that with the juice, but I think I would have done that just to be safe, to guard against any pectic haze
that
would have come out of that juice. And yeah, then it's not at all.
There's not even a Gabby haze.
That's true. I'll start talking like that.
You didn't give me a chance to use that joke last time you were talking about haze, so I had to get it in right now.
So what I did, then I pitched it with Workhorse, with Imperial Workhorse, which is a Belgian Abbey strain.
I was going to ask if there was spice in this, because I get like cinnamon.
Yeah, and Abbey is the. Workhorse was used to ferment Duval. That's I think it's the Duval or Duvel. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I say Duvel. I don't know.
Or Duvel. Yeah. I don't even know how to pronounce it at all. So I'm just
just have a couple and it won't matter.
Yeah, exactly. But so the Duvel brewery, that's where it came from. And I'm 99% sure. I don't have it in front of me. But be that as it may, it is a Belgian. It's like advertised for Belgian stouts and things like that. So that's what I used, and I thought it would take it to about 14%, and I was going to be pretty happy with that. Well, it took it down from 1.134 to 1.05. Took it to 1050, and then it just quit. So it took it to right about 10%, and as I recall, I remember tasting it and thinking, wow, that tastes really, really good. This was on March the 2nd of 2020. I actually wrote that in my notes. Wow. So on I'm impressed with myself. On March the 2nd, I tasted it, and I've got in my notes, delicious but very sweet, 10%, 1050. And what I did is I went ahead, I racked it into another fermenter, and I fed it some Fermax, and I pitched 71B.
Which is a typical wine yeast mead users use.
That's a very common mead yeast. It's used it's used commercially to produce Beaujolais wines in France, and just light-bodied reds. And it can also be used and is used for meads and for fruit wines, things like that. So at any rate, I went ahead and pitched a packet of 71B, and that cleared it out. I mean, that finished the fermentation on out to 0.998, and giving me a really strong product. And I really like what it did. I like the combination fermentation. It kind of gave me the best of both, I think.
Yeah. That's a smart approach. We've been accused of being haphazard and willy-nilly, and in our approach to brewing. But I think that part of what the beauty of, especially what you do, is that you in your jazz drummer background, you can improvise. You can start something, and you can change course if you need to, or you can come up with something new to add to a process, and using your instincts and your knowledge, come out with something that is better. I'm sure this is probably better than what you anticipated.
I imagine. I don't know, but I know it. I know it's really good, and I'd be happy to brew this again and again. I mean, it really came out really good. Of all the different cherry meads that I've made, and apparently this is the fifth one, hence the name. But I really like the result of it. It doesn't hit you over the head. It's very strong. It's very warming, but but it doesn't drink it doesn't drink that strong, to me anyway.
No,
so you drink a whole glass.
Yeah, to me it's not hot, as in alcohol hot.
Mm-hmm.
There is the cherry flavor lingers quite a long time on my tongue, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But then there's also that spice, and I didn't think about it, but that's got to be the contribution from that Belgian yeast.
I think so. Yeah.
To me, it comes across as like cinnamon.
That's what I think too, and I've had other people say that. That's a common comment, that they get a cinnamon spice out of it, a sensation of cinnamon from it.
And it could be that the heat from the alcohol adds to that cinnamon perception, because if you remember back in the day, here I go back to junior high, you always had those guys walking around with, what was it, oil of cinnamon? With the toothpicks in it, and they would sell you one of those for $0.25 or whatever, and then you could walk around with the cinnamon toothpick in your mouth the rest of the day, and it's that cinnamon heat, that really I associate with this. So if you were eating a Luden's cough drop and you had one of those cinnamon toothpicks in your mouth, that's what this is. It's really good. It may be my favorite. I think I like the simple, elegant character of that first one, where it's just like nothing but honey shining through. Mm-hmm. And I like the complexity of the mixture of the fruits in the second one. Mm-hmm. But that strong cherry flavor and that spice is really nice on this third one. And again, it's not like sticky sweet.
Right.
It's very drinkable in that way. And I got to say, there was one question. You didn't use a starter with any of these beer yeasts, right? It's just like a packet.
I just pitched
poured.
Them. Yep, packet. Yep, rip and pitch.
That's my law firm.
Yeah. They did my mortgage.
Oh man. Well, this is.
Yeah, I think the cherry is my favorite too.
Yeah. It's just so good. And again, I'm glad I've got those stoppers that'll take the oxygen away from these as they age even further. But they've one testament to your brewing ability, your mead making ability, is the fact that these are not oxidized.
Nope.
They're still very, very fresh, even though they've been in the bottle for a good long time.
Yeah, and thank you. They're not oxidized, and I like this style of mead in that they aren't they're not gloppy. They're not thick in your palate. I really appreciate that about these. They have a clean. They finish cleanly in your mouth, and who doesn't like that?
I'm leaving that alone.
We'll leave that there.
Oh, well, this is great. I'm glad that I saved these and didn't drink them on my own. because now, we get the benefit of having good advice and good content out there for those who want to take advantage of National Mead Month. And
That's right.
if you do want to renew your membership to the Homebrewers Association, or if you have not joined in the beginning, if you've never been a member, I feel like I'm on NPR all of a sudden. If you
There are no free totes now.
Yeah, operators are standing by. If you do go to homebrewerassociation.org/mead, and you can re-up your membership or join for the first time and get a copy of Ken Schramm's book, The Complete Mead Maker. And you and I have had the great privilege of having meads poured by the man himself, Ken Schramm, at HomebrewCon in the past. And boy, he knows what he's doing. So, as do you, Steve. As always, I appreciate your knowledge and your friendship and your time and your efforts and your meat.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks again to Steve. Man, those were delicious, and they still are, because I saved most of it, thanks to those little rubber vacuum seal stopper thingies. And they're in the fridge, where I'm looking forward to savoring them and sharing them with friends in the future. One day, I hope to be as good as Steve at making meads. Until then, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. So until next time, until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.